Hi guys, in today's video we are going to consider how we use sources and what we need to look at in the source for us to use it effectively. So in this one we're going to consider if we have multiple sources surrounding the idea and the topic of the China one-child policy. So we will have lots of different sources that we can find on the internet. We might have found it on the BBC Bite Size, we might have found it in other places, and we're going to look at what we would do with that source. So the first thing we would do is we would read the source, okay? And I would suggest that you read all of it without doing anything else. Just have a read through it to give you an idea of what the whole source is about. The next thing you can do then is you can highlight the source. Now there's two different ways that you could highlight sources. The first one is you can look at highlighting the general information about what the topic is about. So highlight anything that tells you, in this instance, what is the one-child policy and how does it work? What is the policy about? So we can highlight the source. Next is we can take two different colour highlighters and we can highlight what the pros of the source are and what the cons are. So what are the pros of the one-child policy? That it reduced the population of China, that it enabled the country to give the resources to the people that it had because it stopped having as many people. It had a positive impact on the number of people that were being born. There were less people being born and therefore less strain on resources, etc. We can then highlight what were the negatives about that policy, and in this instance that would be the human rights issues, the things that happened against women. Women were forced to have abortions or forced to be sterilised, etc. So we can do that. The next thing we can do with the source, if we want to, is we can look at the impacts of the policy, and we can highlight the impacts in three different ways in geography. So the first one is we could look at the social impacts. What were the impacts on the people in China? The next thing we could look at is the economic impact. What were the impacts on the economy? Did it help or hinder the economy? And the third is we can look at the environmental impacts of the policy. So the fact that there was probably less people and so less air and land and water pollution, etc. So we could either highlight the source with about information, pros and cons, or we could highlight the source about the social, economic and environmental impacts. So there are two ways that we can look at a source and we can highlight it in terms of what information we take out of it. Now, the final thing, if you want to stretch yourself a little bit more, is to consider the source in terms of its bias. Is it biased? Is it truthful? We need to look at it in terms of who produced this information and therefore what kind of bias does it contain. So that is the use of sources.